started while we're getting the slides up. First of all, thank you so much for having me today. How many people here have taken the Clifton Strengths Assessment or know what it is? Okay, just a couple. Okay, that's totally fine. We're gonna talk through it. Just a little bit of background. I've been with Microsoft. I lost track. I asked my manager the other day, I think 13 years, something like that. I've been in multiple roles. I've survived the last couple difficult situations we've had at Microsoft the last couple of months. I super passionate about SMB, the SMB space specifically. I have been an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur for many, many years. And like I said, I've been involved with IAMCP for many years and always glad to support this organization. I think it does great things. I think it does a lot of things better than Microsoft. You guys are awesome at, the P2P motion. We're still trying to figure that out. We talk about it, but I see IAMCP really execute on P2P. So again, thank you for having me. Working on getting our slides up. Before I jump into today, what we're going to talk about, Clifton Strengths, and I'll give you a little bit of history on what it is and the 7 leadership skills that they've done a lot of research on how, how you should be leading in today's climate and just in general. So it doesn't matter if you don't know tech. Hopefully you're going to get a lot out of this. It's about working with people and learning. So I want to, though, get the slides up because before I get into that, I want to make sure I'm going to start with my Microsoft hat, which is I do lead our communication strategy for what we call Scale Partners or Americas. Does everybody know that we recently made an announcement? Hopefully you were all in Inspire that the Global Partner Solutions team was US specific. We used to be called the US Partner Solutions team. We are now the Americas. So we've merged LATAM and Canada. And we've all come together and we're now referred to as the Americas. I have not yet figured out our communication strategy across all 3 of those different regions, now 1. But I wanted to share with you, and if we can't get this going, that's okay. I'll bring it back up. Share here? Okay. Okay.
Really does not want my login.
Okay, let me share my screen. There are a couple key areas that on it. Get there.
Hey.
Okay, let me get it into presentation mode so you can see better. There's just a couple of communication areas I'd like you to be aware of if you're not currently aware of. We do a partner insider call once a month, all kinds of various topics. This coming one in August, it's usually the first Wednesday of the month. We switched it just because we went through so many changes. So this month it's August 16th. And we're going to be having a lot of our solution leads come on and kind of do a fiscal year 24 kickstart on all of the different solution areas. So please join us if you're able to. If you're not, definitely still register and you can always watch it on demand. I also have a lot of great guest speakers the following month. I don't know if any of you know Vince Menzioni. He will be coming on to talk about how to really execute marketplace. So please keep your eye on that and join whenever you're able. We have a monthly newsletter you can sign up for. And then most importantly, we have a LinkedIn group. It's now called the Americas LinkedIn group. So we're really doing a lot of work there to put out messages and also to have partners engage with each other. We've also started, let me see if I put the slide. I did. A communication taxonomy. So one of the things with LinkedIn is that you put things there and then everything gets kind of lost. So we have started a taxonomy. You'll see as an example in our newsletter, we have it in our newsletter, we've got it in our LinkedIn posts, that we will put at the beginning of all of our communications. And we changed that word not to impact it to partner audience, like who are the partners that should pay attention to this post or article, what role is it targeted at, what is it? And then, what part of your journey does this content relate to? So we're really trying to help you, look for what you might need specifically. So same thing, you'll see the solution area in there. If it's an Azure specific thing, we'll have a hashtag Azure as well. We've already seen partners start using, we have a, question for the group. We just saw a P2P motion happen the other day within the LinkedIn group. So, definitely get involved if you're not involved there. All right. So We're gonna jump into Clifton strengths, and do I have this is my notes slide here, page? Yeah, okay, good, perfect. Okay, no problem, no problem. Switch my glasses on back and forth. I'm gonna put my
It
reading.
was gonna be easy, but thank you.
That's okay. I'm gonna put my reading glasses on so I can read my notes. Okay, so we're gonna do a quick icebreaker. It's gonna be really fun. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about what Clifton Strengths is. Then we're gonna go into the top 7 leadership skills, and we'll talk about each one. And I think I made it kind of fun. So let's get started. And this is gonna be like also for you all to get to know a little bit more about the folks that are sitting next to you in the room. All right, so actually before I do this, one of the things we talk about with Clifton Strengths is that it's an assessment. It's you take an assessment, you get back your 34 strengths. For those that took it, did you like get your report and you looked at your top and then you immediately went to your bottom and you're like, how do I fix my bottom? Right? Why am I low in empathy, or why am I low in individualization? Human nature to do that. But the concept behind Clifton Strengths really is, what if everybody were to lean into what your strengths are and collaborate with and work with others that have the lower side of what your innate strengths are. So when we start to do this icebreaker, you'll see that this will tell you a little bit about kind of who the people are that you're sitting next to. And if you do ever do the Clifton Strengths assessment, you can start to kind of apply what you do here. Okay, so the first one is you're invited to a party with people you don't know. Let's have a raise of hands for all of those people that are like, oh yeah, let's go, I'm ready. All right, so just take a look around the room to see who are those people. Right, so if you're the person that, most people think I'm that person, I'm more the other side, right? So you might want to pair up with one of those people if you're going to an IAMCP event that you don't know people at, right? And how many are the, oh no, I'm going to kind of sit back, I'm going to watch, maybe find one person that I'm a little comfortable talking to, okay? How many are in the middle? Okay. So sometimes that's surprising for people, right? Because you see people like myself get up here and present and feel comfortable, but I am definitely more of the, oh no, a little bit shy in that kind of respect. All right, next one. You're invited to participate in a competition. How many of you are like, let's do it, I'm ready?
Eventually one of these.
That could be, yeah. Now, yes. Now, yes, okay. How many of you are more on the, I don't know, I want more details. I don't know, do I have to, why do I have to compete? Can I just do the task kind of thing? Okay, so you see, right, like competition is one of the Clifton Strengths. It's somebody who is driven, right, by competition and wants to always do better and compete and succeed. All right, next one. Your manager assigns you to work on a complex project. How many people want those details? Okay. And how many are more about like, give me the big strategy? I just want to know what the strategy is. I'll go find people to work on the details. Okay. There's a really good mix of people in this room, right? So keep an eye on the people, the answers to these and have the conversations because, and the whole concept of partner to partner and working with other people is all about finding those people, right, that really complement your strengths. All right, think of 1 or 2 more. You have to find your way to a new place you've never been before. How many people are no problem, get in the car, get on the plane, get wherever I'm going? Okay, so we've got a lot of travelers in here. Everybody's pretty comfortable with that. I think the GPS systems now probably have changed that a little bit, but some people have anxiety around, right, travel, and that could be more about details, or they want to know exactly where they're going. Years ago, I used to like go to different things, print it out, make sure I had like a couple things printed out when I, was going somewhere. So, all right. So what I said earlier, about Clifton Strengths, it was developed by this gentleman, Dr. Donald O. Clifton. And again, the concept is what will happen, right, when we think about what is right with people. rather than fixating on what is wrong. Okay, everyone has paper and pen?
Yes.
Everybody also on Teams, you have a piece of paper and pen? Okay, so I want you to just take your paper, just put a line down the middle. Or you could do one side and then we can flip to the other side, whatever's easier. So I'm gonna give you a quick exercise to do. So don't do anything until I tell you. What you're going to do is pick up your pen. And when I tell you, not until I tell you, I use my strengths every day. You're gonna write that phrase 3 times when I tell you. Is everyone ready? Okay, on your mark, get set, switch your pen to your non-dominant hand, go.
This is a competition.
Oh, this is awful.
Lord. Do better with my mouth. It's like-
I've forgotten the spell. There's had to be readable spelling.
This is what my teenagers kind of.
Not readable.
Yes.
I have a little advantage because I had fractured my right arm.
He said 3 times.
I think I spell better with this hand. Can I copy and paste? Right, 3 times?
3 times,
Oh,
2 or 3 times. I think we're, I hear all the rumblings and the comments and I think we've got enough probably to have a
Can we do
The
copy
next
and
step.
paste?
All right, if you've gotten it written once or twice, that's fine. What I want you to do is flip your paper over or go to the other side if you put a line down the middle. And when I say go, you're gonna do the same thing on the other side, but with your dominant hand. So on your mark, it's set, go. Okay. Competition. All right, so let's just talk about this a little bit. I heard a lot of comments, but what were you feeling when I asked you to switch to your non-dominant hand?
Thought and effort.
What was it?
Thought and effort.
Thought and effort, okay?
Shock.
Shock,
Definitely.
like taken off guard,
Discomfort.
discomfort.
Also, what's the point? I mean, hard to read.
What's the point? You can't read it, right?
Illegible.
I felt a little excited for the challenge, I think.
Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. What else? Anything else? I heard a lot of like comments, like, gosh, this is messy.
Took a really long time.
Took time.
Yeah.
Didn't feel natural, right? What happened when you did it with your dominant hand?
No effort.
Easy, fast, comfort. Okay.
Maybe a few years down the road, we won't write like this, we typing, right?
Yeah,
All this don't talking.
true.
No, I'm writing.
It's true. Well, also, we don't write a lot anymore, right? So does anyone maybe think they know kind of what the point of this exercise is?
You would have appreciation for other people that are not strong in the thing that you're strong in.
Maybe why we should focus on the things we're good at than trying to make that better.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Right. It's, when you get your strength support and you look at these strengths that you have, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to put them up on the screen right now so you can see them. The things that we do that are innate to us, right? That we feel comfortable with. Let me see, did I include, I didn't include that one slide. The things that we're naturally drawn to, the things that we do well, the things that you have those aha moments, like after you've done it, like, wow, I really accomplished something, right? Those are the innate strengths that we have as individuals, you know, and I know for me, and before I even understood all this, like data is a struggle for me and it is everywhere and you have to use data, you know, for your job. First thing I do whenever I get into a new position, it's like I go seek out those people that are strong in that to help me complement myself rather than me trying to sit and figure out, you know, and struggle through, you know, how to get that data that I need, right? So the whole idea really is leaning into your strengths. It doesn't mean that what's on the bottom 34 isn't something you don't have. Like sometimes people have empathy in the very bottom and they're like, but I'm a really empathetic person. And you know, how could I not have empathy in my top 5? I care about people, I volunteer, right? It just may be that your strength is slightly different and empathy comes through a different way. Right. So within Clifton Strengths, I'm just giving you a little bit of a background on it because I think it just helps as we have a further conversation on leadership. There's 4 domains. There's executing, and these are the different strengths. They're also referred to as talents with Clifton Strengths. Executors, like they want to make things happen, right? They want to turn ideas into reality. There's also something called a blind spot. Anyone have any idea what a blind spot could be? Like if you're an executor, like you want to do things, get things done, what could a blind spot possibly be?
This executable that you just didn't think of?
Something you didn't think of?
Yeah, like, you know, like if you're, like you said, you're executing something, but there's something maybe you weren't aware of that should have been implemented in to your executing process that you have yet to do. So
Okay.
maybe lack of knowledge in that area. Who knows?
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
Sometimes there's a people component to execution. You might overlook the importance of communicating to the people
Right.
as opposed to just getting the task done.
Yeah. So you're busy forging ahead, right? And a blind spot could be that people are like, wow, he just doesn't care about people.
Yeah.
Like he's just focused on the task, right? But you're a good empathetic person that does care about people, right? But you're an executor. You have another?
Not knowing why or not understanding why first.
Yes. Yes. Okay. The next one is influencing, right? So you're somebody that likes to help influence others. You take charge. You make sure that other people in the room are being heard. Envision like a meeting and you're the influencer and you're kind of, you know, making sure everyone's getting heard. What could a blind spot be there? No.
Too loud or assertive?
Too loud or assertive, right? The opposite also is like, oh, they're just a peacemaker. They're just trying to please everybody. Right? So they're not really going to get the task done. Yep, Reza.
Talking too much, not asking enough questions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. The third one's relationship building, right? You like to build relationships, like to hold a team together. What blind spots do you think could be in a relationship builder?
Getting stuff done.
Not getting stuff done. Yeah. Right. So the executor's like, dude, you know, you told me already 5 times what you did on your vacation. That's awesome, but we got to get this done, right? Exactly. And then the final one is strategic thinking. And I get this a lot. Like, how do I not have strategic thinking in my top 10? Right? I didn't have it in my top 10 and I'm in all my roles have been strategic. And I'm like, how do I not have this? Right? It doesn't mean you don't have it. It just means that a lot of these qualities, I became a coach and a facilitator on this. It's really interesting to me and it's really usable. You can, you know, when you understand your strengths and you have a team that understands their strengths, it helps with conflict resolution. It helps with career development. It helps with really everything you do day to day because it becomes more of your culture that you talk about, hey, you know, you approach this with this kind of mindset versus this. And as a, you know, executor or as a relationship person, this is kind of how I'm taking this, right? So it really changes the dialogue that you have with people. So strategic thinking, right? A lot of strategic thinkers are, you know, analytical and they're futuristic. They're thinking about what's in the future and what we can get done. What could be a blind spot with those folks?
Present,
Always in their head.
not focus on the short term, the present, what's going on now.
Confronting reality.
Confronting reality, taking a long time to execute because they want to know all the details, right?
Too much.
So that's just a tiny bit. I wanted to give you like a frame of reference on the Clifton Strengths philosophy. So this was a really good quote from Aristotle, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, right? So your leadership style comes through in everything you do, whether you realize it or not. I think what's really important is that you could be a leader in your household, right? You could be a leader at work. You can be a leader in your community, right? So I sometimes when I'm doing this for, managers or even non-managers, they're like, well, I'm not a manager, or, well, my manager, and everyone has the ability to have and does do leadership. Just depends what area of your life that you're doing it. So, before you can lead others, you have to know how to lead yourself. You have to know kind of about yourself. So Clifton Strengths did a study, and that's what I based this presentation on. I want to make sure I read some of my notes too. So a lot of these competencies that we're going to talk about, you'll hear from like an HR perspective usually, but it really can be used as just a general rule of thumb in how you operate and how you interact with people. So let's go through the first one, right? So building relationships. We all know who Oprah Winfrey is. I think, Oprah was somebody who built her empire by building relationships. So when we build relationships, we are creating partnerships. We're building trust, right? We do that here within the IAMCP. I'm going to read just a couple things here because I want to make sure that I get all the messages across. Managers are uniquely positioned to facilitate powerful partnerships. They can see the larger network of talent that individual contributors cannot, and they have the authority to assemble innovative teams. In turn, employees have the support they need to perform and the bonds they need to feel energized and resilient. When looking at the work to be done, consider new and creative partnerships across your organizations. And I think we're in a really interesting time. I mean, we always are with technology. So, thinking about those relationships, that's why all of you are sitting here, in this room. I think that's a pretty obvious thing. Any questions so far? Pretty straightforward. Nothing that's going to shock you. I think sometimes it's just a good reminder. Yeah, Sanjay.
So, relationships are a two-way street, Helene, right? So what happens when both ways aren't equal?
I'm going to put that question back to you, or I'm going to ask someone else to answer that question.
I would work harder on my own, but then at some point you have to re-examine the relationship, right?
I agree. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
We have to work on convincing them to like us.
But do you?
I try.
You can try. Yeah.
It's in order to build a relationship, you have to find ways to create and deliver value to the person with whom you want to have a relationship, right? It is a two-way street, but if you're not getting anything back, then you have to figure out maybe there's something more I could offer that is of value to that individual.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And I think, for many years before I joined Microsoft, I was a strategic alliance manager for Microsoft. And people used to ask me how I was successful at it, because I know, and I work for Microsoft, like getting mind share from Microsoft is, very difficult. But I always went into with the attitude of, what I had to offer as well as what I wanted. Whereas most people tend to go in with, well, this is what I need you to do for me. Right. So I think seeing both sides. Yeah. All right. Number 2, developing people. We all know this gentleman, hopefully on the screen, Satya. Satya's really worked hard within Microsoft, for those of you that have been around through the bomber days and Bill Gates. And there was, and you all felt it too, the partner ecosystem is part of Microsoft. There was a shift. It was tactical, tangible. You could feel the shift when Satya took over, right? He has that compassion, that empathy, the different style, right? He really works on growing people, right? So I'm gonna read this again, and sorry I'm reading, but I think it's the best way to make sure I get the information, right? So helping others become more effective through strengths, expectation, and coaching. Right, so I think sometimes it's very easy to pass somebody by. And I know Ashley and I talk about D&I all the time, and DEI, DNI. You know, I use Clifton Strengths to do a lot of work on inclusion, specifically hidden inclusion. You will see most people at Microsoft are willing to do what I'm doing today, stand up, get in front of an audience and talk. But there's a lot of people that don't want to do that, aren't the A-type personality. You might have employees or folks that you're working with that sit in the room and don't say a word during a meeting, right? It doesn't mean that that person, you know, is not engaged, doesn't care, doesn't have the answer, doesn't see the things that nobody else sees, right? We're just different. We're different people, right? So we have to learn what those strengths are for that person and then figure out, going back to relationships, Sanjay, right? How does that person communicate? How does that person feel comfortable in engaging in meetings or activities?
Could you repeat what Satya's role is,
What his role is, he's our CEO.
the CEO?
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, so number one was build relationships. Number 2, develop people. Number 3 is about leading change, right? Oops, 2 slides going here. Hopefully we all know this gentleman as well, Nelson Mandela. You know, huge change leader. So I'm gonna read a little bit here too. Although change comes to everyone, every individual experiences change differently. A change in process, timing, goals, or resources may inspire someone while it may discourage others, right? So being aware again of yourself and the people that you're engaging with, how they are handling that change. And the best managers are able to anticipate concerns, but even more importantly, change is an opportunity to dive deeper into relationships and to get to know individuals better. It's an invitation to ask questions, right? It's an invitation to go that extra mile with somebody, talk to someone, ask them what they're experiencing. And in this fast world that we are living in, taking that moment, you know, can make the absolute difference to your relationship with that person and to that person's life. Number 4, inspire others. Does anyone know who this woman is? Uncle Brandon? What?
Oh, I said it just has her name on there, but.
Yeah, does anyone know who she is?
Statistic.
She is autistic. She changed the meat industry. She is autistic. She has a book out. I forgot do I have the name of her book in here? I don't, but if you look her up, but she was first one of the people to come out and really talk about autism. She also, I worked for Whole Foods Market as an educator for many years. She helped transform that entire industry. She believed that cows felt the stress of being slaughtered, right? And so she went and she decided to go through the process of what it would be like for the cow to get in its kennel, walk through the process, go to where the, you know, the actual slaughterhouse was. And she wrote a whole book on this process and changed the meat industry, because there were certain signs, certain things that to slaughter the animal was a lot less stressful on them if things were handled differently. But she was autistic and people didn't want to listen to her. And she really inspired others by not quitting and not giving up. It's a very interesting story if you're interested in reading that. So I'm going to read again. Many managers enjoy being managers because they enjoy people. They may have found that inspiring others comes naturally. The strain, though, and drain on your team are real, right? We're going through a really unique time in history. And recognizing others and generating positivity is even more important now. It requires new tools, and it requires new commitment, right? So again, I don't think anything I'm telling you today is new to you. I just think it's like, wow, have I stopped to think about how am I showing up? How am I being a leader? How am I stepping into, my customer conversations, right? How am I, thinking about making that connection with my customer, with my child, with whomever it is that you're, having those relationships with. Number 5, thinking critically, right? Gathering the right information and evaluating. And I think also if you do decide to take Clifton's strengths, and I will share an article that has all of this listed. I'll share it with you so you can share it out with everybody. Like I said, you can use Clifton's strengths and you can take your strengths and apply them to these things, right? So how do I, as somebody, as a communicator, think critically? I don't do it internally. I think out loud. I talk through things, right? So when I'm in a room with somebody who's more of a internal processor and not a communicator, sometimes there's frustration, I'm sure, for both of us, right? So it's being aware of that and learning how to actually come to a middle ground to communicate with each other. So this woman, Sarah Margaret Fuller, she was from the 1800s. She was the first woman to ever be able to use the Harvard Law Library. She also, she was best known for her landmark book, Women in the 19th Century, as well as, like I said, being allowed into the Harvard College Library. She was also an American journalist, a critic, and translator, and women's rights advocate back in the 1800s, early 1800s, which you can imagine, what we advocate for today, whether you're a woman, a minority, whatever it might be, right? Being an advocate is not an easy thing, and I can't even imagine what that was like in the 1800s. So thinking critically, one of the rewarding parts of being a manager is getting to be in the know about what's going on in your organization. Through friendships and partnerships at the leadership level, you get all the information, right? But passing that information on, to the teams that you're working with, I think, the concept of that top-down approach hasn't, I don't know, it's changed, right? It's not just top-down. We need to make sure that we're coming from the bottom up, right? We think that we can think critically by having one set of knowledge, but really having, the sets of knowledge coming from both. Ashley and I worked together at the Microsoft stores. That's how we met. And I mentor a lot of people, and most people I mentor are younger than me. And I was working with 18-year-olds at the Microsoft store. And, I was like, what am I doing? And I learned so much, right? Mentoring is not just about mentoring, people that are younger than you. I now seek out people that are younger than me, right? Because they have a different set of knowledge. It's the same thing with the strengths. It's finding those people that have an entirely different strength set than you do to figure out, like, how do you work together, or how do they do certain things so that you can apply it with other people that you're working with. All right, that's number 5. Number 6, communicating clearly. We all know this gentleman and his speech, Martin Luther King. Your strengths come in really in an important way in communication, right? I talked about this a little bit earlier, is how do you communicate? Are you a verbal communicator? Do you prefer to email? Do you prefer to listen to the information, think about it, and then respond? Or are you somebody that responds on the spot? I mean, how many of you have been in a situation where you had a miscommunication with somebody? Specifically at work, right? It's pretty common. And sometimes it's just about how we're delivering the information, right? And I think also with communication, right, and you've probably all heard, like, it's not always about what you say, but it's about how you say it. and learning how people receive information. So if you are working with somebody that maybe doesn't receive information verbally, they get overwhelmed for whatever reason, right? We don't know what that reason is. Have a conversation. Like, would you prefer me, might take an extra step on your end, but would you prefer me to maybe put this in some notes and send it to you? Would that be easier? And then you can get back to me. Right? We just don't think about all this because we're all moving so fast every single day. All right. And number 7, creating accountability. So when we hear the word accountability, we often think of metrics or performance reviews, but a much better way to think of accountability is as an engagement and ownership, right? When people are engaged with their work, they feel accountable to others and to themselves. When they own their work, they take the responsibility for the outcomes. The fastest way to generate personal ownership in someone is to give them work they love to do and naturally do well, right? So it leans into their strengths. We can't always do this, right? Sometimes you're in a job, but I use this also for career development. One of the images I show somebody standing up, bumping their head like on a what do we call that? Ceiling, right? Every time you stand up, you bump your head. If you're doing that in your job, guess what? Probably not in the right job, right? You're not leaning into what feels right to you and what's innate to you, what your strengths are, right? Because you're fighting it every single day. So this is Eleanor Roosevelt, right? She held the belief that there is a very concrete connection between choices and accountability. In her worldview, the choice was clear to accept responsibility for choosing good over evil. In the long run, we shape our lives and we shape ourselves. The process never ends until we die, and choices we make are ultimately our own responsibility. That was a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. So those are our top 7 leadership skills. If you are, let me keep hitting this one. If you are someone who's going to either, and I can also send the link. There's 2 assessments. One is a really quick one. You get 5, like your top 5. It's pretty short. It's like $19.99. If you want to invest in the other one, I think it's $59.99. It's a really robust report that comes back to you. If you want to invest in that and decide to do that, one of the things I always tell people is, how do you use your strengths daily? I have them in my signature, right? And I can't tell you the number of times that's been a door opener for somebody that I don't know. They're like, oh, I see that, in your top 10, your top 5, you have adaptability, right? I'm dealing with this project and I am struggling with how to adapt. Do you have any tips for me? Right? It's really been a great door opener for me. Profile, email signature. People come to me and they're like, I don't know how to take this and really put it into action and really work on it. And I always encourage people, like, pick a strength and really lean into it. Like, lean into it for 30 days, right? In everything you do, and see how it changes how things operate in your world. And then again, just having the conversation with people. Like I said, it's a great door opener. It's a great way to handle a conflict, because rather than dealing with the conflict or the topic of the conflict, you talk about, like, I'm a communicator, you're this, how do we get to fixing this situation, right? It becomes the situation rather than the conflict between the people. So we're at the end. I hope that was helpful. Like I said, it's not rocket science, but it's really useful to do the assessment. And if you're interested, like I said, I'll send it to Ashley, and I'll also send the article from Gallup that talks about the 7 leadership skills. Any questions?
Just want to make a comment about the StrengthsFinder analysis. When I took it, it was revelatory to myself. In fact, I kind of struggled with the outcome at first, because I looked at it and I thought, what it's telling me my strengths are and what my preferred career choices ought to be is not what I do. And so it came as a surprise and kind of lacked credibility. But then as I thought about it, and I thought about, okay, it may not be what I do for a career, But then I started thinking about choices I make outside of my career, things I voluntarily get involved with. So mine was, I think, an arranger, kind of, it was like events organizer. Shouldn't say that out loud with Ashley. And I thought,
Check.
going all the way back to my youth, I volunteered or led organizations at the university and got involved with student events and leading those kinds of things. I thought, oh my gosh, this is totally what I choose to do and what I do well on my own. And it was just, it was one of those like hidden insights that I might not have thought about myself. It caused me to kind of want to kind of reshape how I position myself and try to leverage and bring out that strength more, which I was really kind of hiding because I didn't really think of it as applicable to my career. But then I thought, if this is my greatest strength, I better figure out ways to leverage it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I lead our communication strategy, but I didn't choose this job. I had a manager 3 years ago now who said, hey, we think you'd be great for this job. And I was like, I've never done communications. What are you talking about? You know, and then I was like, oh yeah, my number one strength is communication, right? So sometimes you don't see it in yourself. Yeah, and the report is very insightful and confusing sometimes because you don't understand. But as you read through it, and I'm sure you saw the arranger come out in other areas of how you were working.
Exactly.
Teresa, after you guys duel it out.
In some of these assessments, I guess there's a desire to try and use it to help in the hiring process. And there's also controversy, right?
Yes.
About using it for a hiring process. So in this case, I guess, if you don't use it in the hiring process, you might use it in the team development process internally once you have people in place.
Mhm.
So in this case, is there some inkling that it might be useful for hiring?
You know, I agree that whole topic is controversial. I wouldn't say I know enough to make that decision. I'm not an HR person. I would say that if you are a strength-led person and you are interviewing people, right? I think just self-awareness, if you were to ask people, maybe not necessarily, it doesn't have to be the strength terms, but if you were to ask people, what projects, make you excited? And, some of those questions we ask naturally, but we don't think about, is this really a strength of the person or are they saying it because this is what the job's requiring, right? But you should be able to feel some of that energy from someone when they answer that kind of question.
So similar to the questions you asked at the very outset.
Yeah.
About introvert, extrovert, et cetera.
Right, like sometimes it won't match. It's like, well, you're saying, I don't want to do competition, but like this role is all about like, you got to beat the sales team on the East Coast because you're going to be running the West Coast, right? So,
Yeah, it's kind of related to what Brian was saying. I'm just curious because I know I've actually been on a team where early on we did the Myers-Briggs and we had a whole meeting afterwards about everyone's results and, I'm INTJ or INFJ or whatever. And as the conversation continued, I was very much turned off because I felt like it was just a ridiculous amount of information about everyone that I really didn't feel comfortable with. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to work and just enjoy people, enjoy my coworkers as coworkers, enjoy the team as a team, and not really get into so much personal detail about personality. So I'm just curious as to what everybody else thinks in the room in terms of Myers-Briggs versus Clifton strengths. I know personally, I would much rather be interested in what someone's strengths are for this assessment than I would Myers-Briggs. I was just curious what everybody else thought as well.
yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think all of these things are, what you end up with though is some kind of an archetype, some kind of at the end of the day though, people are far more complicated than that. One of the things you pointed out, getting in front of a room, right? Functionally, I'm an introvert, just like a lot like what you were describing, right? One of the things that I've learned, one of the things that I now mentor, especially younger people about, is don't make an assumption that the person in front of that room is an extrovert and is super excited about whatever it is. They may be excited about it, but fundamentally, one of the things I've learned, and I've been in sales now as a role for 30 years, is that these are skills. And anybody can learn those skills. I can learn, and obviously from an IAMCP leadership standpoint, I've been in front of this room many times. So these are skills that people can learn. And if you use that information that comes from an assessment like this to pigeonhole somebody, say, oh, they're an introvert, they would never be good at this. Absolutely wrong way to
Agreed.
use that information.
And if you think about what I said in the beginning too, right, it's about knowing yourself. Right? So
Sure.
it starts with you. You know, I chose this particular path with this assessment and to become a facilitator just because I felt it was so actionable. And it doesn't necessarily have to be personal. I do some other exercises that I think are eye-opening. Like one of them is called "You Get the Best of Me When," right? And you fill in like, you get the worst of me when, you get the best of me. And the things that people put are really, you know, like for me, you get the worst of me when I'm doing something repetitive, right? So for a manager to know that if I give you this like project and you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again, she's not going to get, he's not going to get the best of me, right? Or you get the worst of me at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you make a meeting and I haven't had time to have a piece of chocolate or get my coffee, right? So it's really just knowledge. But I agree, like, you know, we don't go like into the super personal side, but it's I think relationship oriented.
I've used a lot of those personality assessment tests in our hiring practices in the past. And one thing I think was always important to just remember, kind of to Eric's point, is not to use them as an absolute. You don't necessarily disqualify, but it's a data point that gives you information about that individual candidate that you might want to probe during the interview. If that person is an introvert and they're going into a sales job that would require them to be on the stage, you need to kind of probe that a little bit. And also StrengthsFinder is a little bit different. You know, it's really kind of getting into the person's inherent strengths and abilities, whereas DISC and Myers-Briggs, and there's a host of others, tell a little bit more broadly about the individual, their natural disposition to things. So they can be used in different ways.
Absolutely. I think that was David. I'll come to you 1 second, David. And the other thing with this is that typically once you're an adult, unless you have a very significant life change, your strengths don't change. Your top 10 might shift around a little bit, you know, and I get people that want to take it over all the time, and they do. And, you know, maybe one thing will move from 4 to 1 or, you know, 9 to 3 or something like that. But it is innate to who you are. So it's quite interesting in that respect. And I think, was that you, David?
Yeah, it was. Thanks, Helene. Great session. I was just going to build on what Cherie said and the other gentleman about the, you know, he mentioned Myers-Briggs, there's DISC, there's Enneagram, there's all these things. And it's interesting because if you take all of them, you sometimes do end up with different results. But the point with that I was going to say is trying not to label someone is also critical, but it also, I think, helps with understanding other people. There was a scenario here where we were working with a leader that just was a true skeptic. And, you know, the reference of, hey, he's a 6 on the Enneagram and you identify him as a true skeptic helped you realize that when you're communicating with that person, that it's not because of how we're communicating with them. Like you all of a sudden start feeling like they don't like me. Why is everything being shut down? Am I doing a poor job at delivering? So knowing someone else's strength or someone else's, you know, personality helps you as an individual just identify as well. So, you know, not taking it personally that every single suggestion you make to this person, they're killing the idea, and then it's, oh, they just don't like my suggestions. No, it's how, you know, maybe you learn a different way to present your suggestions because you know that person is a skeptic. And then the other thing I will say, you just said like your strengths are kind of inert and they don't change. I actually kind of disagree a little bit because I think life's priorities as you get older dictate, you know, we're driven by our priorities and our goals in life, and strengths might weaken or strengthen. You know, the skills might strengthen or weaken based on those priorities in our life, and our goals in our life, which could change as you get older. You know, maybe once you feel you've reached financial stability, then the skills that drive you for financial stability may not be as important anymore. They might not be your top 5.
Yes, I agree. I will say from the research that's been done of hundreds of thousands of people, it is very slim that your core strengths change from like the top 10. But again, there's 34 that they've
The
identified.
prioritization.
Of them, and when you are needing a different strength may change, yeah. Thanks, David. Any other comments, questions?
A comment. We've done a few of these internally. One of them very specifically was about how people process information. It could be kinesthetic, auditory, visual, and something called auditory digital. It's clear that I am in a certain camp. So I'm in the auditory digital camp where I see charts, numbers, no problem. Other folks, clearly auditory. So if I give them charts and numbers, their eyes glaze over. If I speak to them, talk them through it, much better. And then recently, a couple of folks pointed out to me that they are visual learners. So rather than me trying to get notes on one note page or to get a spreadsheet, I took out the whiteboard, and just like my left-handed writing, I'm terrible at the whiteboard, but they were visual learners, so it made things a lot easier. So I guess my point is that it helps to know how people are wired and helps to know how they receive information.
I agree with the comment, like, it's not a hardcore, like, today I'm going to lean into communicate, or today's gonna be communication day, right? It's who we are as people and how we operate each day, so. Yeah,
There's a show called The Bear.
I keep seeing the previews for that.
Swear by it. Watch it.
It was silly.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I'm not gonna spoil it, but there's one character. The whole show is a lot about like finding strengths and putting people in a position to succeed. But there's one character in particular that like doesn't know where he fits, doesn't feel confident and everything. And there's one episode just devoted to him where he finds his calling, and it's just brilliant. Because it wasn't that like he wasn't good at anything. It's just he hadn't found his thing, right? Where he really flourished, and he blew everyone away, and they were just amazed at how good he was at this one thing compared to everyone else.
Okay, I'll check it out.
What was the name of it again? The Bear.
The Bear.
What's it on? Is it streaming?
Hulu, yeah.
Yeah, I kept seeing it and I'm like,
It's amazing.
okay.
Especially if you're like an overachiever, it very much gets into that world.
Okay, all right,
Very
Can I make
nice.
one last comment?
sure.
So it makes so much sense to lean into your strength and then sort of partner with people who have complementary strengths. And it's really good for teams, but if you're like a business owner, oftentimes you have to, it's the growth mindset, Carol Dweck. It's like where there's the type of person who says, I'm not good at that, I'm not gonna try, I'm just gonna do what I'm good at. And then there's the person who's like, well, I'm gonna keep trying this thing I'm not so good at, and get better. And I know in my life, I've had to do that. And to this day, I will catch myself falling into things that I enjoy. I'm more technical and yeah, it's like, oh, I'll contact that customer later. I'd rather do this.
Yeah.
And I will stop myself and say, you know what, I gotta like focus, even though I don't want to. So.
Yeah, look, being an entrepreneur, I've done it. I did it for 10 years. It's, you are sometimes everything and everyone in your business, and that is tough. But you will recognize that when you are doing those things that you feel good, it's like, those are your innate strengths, right? That's where you get the joy
I'm
from.
hoping to get to a point where I can just do
Yes,
those. And
yeah.
that has to be taken care of.
Well, I know, like I said, like if I ever start a business again, like the first person I'm hiring is accountant. I will never sit in front of QuickBooks again for 36 hours straight trying to figure out things. So, you learn. But yeah, being an entrepreneur is a noble and tough thing to do. All right. Well, thank you for your time today. Hopefully this was helpful as a reminder. Thank you. I will share out some information and the communication channels for Microsoft.